You know how we all talk about things like burnout or happiness or even social support? We know they're real. We feel them every day. But how do you actually pin them down with scientific precision? I mean, how do you truly measure the unmeasurable? Well, that is the huge challenge we're going to unpack today.
Just think about it for a second. You can't put happiness on a kitchen scale, right? You can't measure burnout with a tape measure. So how in the world do researchers take something so personal, so subjective, and turn it into cold, hard data they can actually study? It sounds kind of impossible, but it's not.
Okay, so in the science world, there's a name for these invisible concepts: a latent construct. A perfect example is intelligence. You can't literally see it or touch it, but you can definitely see its effects. Things like test scores or how well someone solves a puzzle. This is the core problem that scientists in psychology and public health are trying to solve all the time.
And the solution? It's this fascinating and, honestly, super meticulous process called scale development. It's basically a 9-step journey that takes a fuzzy, abstract idea and forges it into a sharp, reliable measurement tool. This isn't guesswork at all. It's like a form of high-precision scientific construction.
So this whole thing is basically broken down into 3 big phases. First up, phase 1, the blueprint. And just like building a house or a complex machine, you absolutely cannot start without a solid, detailed plan.
Okay, so this blueprint phase, it's got 2 main jobs. First, you have to define your domain with extreme clarity. For instance, are you measuring burnout in general, or are you measuring burnout specifically for emergency room nurses? Those are 2 very different things. Once you've got your boundaries set, you move on to generating items, which is really just the fancy technical term for the questions that are going to make up your survey.
So where do these questions even come from? Well, researchers use 2 main approaches. You've got the deductive or top-down method, which starts with all the existing theories and research papers. Then you have the inductive or bottom-up method, which starts with real people, doing interviews and focus groups to hear about their actual experiences. The best scales, they do both. They combine the theory with reality.
And get this, you don't just whip up a handful of questions. Researchers are actually told to create an initial pool of questions that's at least twice as long as the final scale they're aiming for. So if you want a 10-question scale in the end, you're going to start with 20, 30, maybe even more. Why so many? Because you need a ton of raw material to work with. And believe me, a lot of it is going to get cut.
And before they even think about moving on, every single one of those questions gets put under the microscope. This is called assessing content validity. Basically, you bring in a panel of experts, and you also bring in people from the group you're trying to study. And you ask them, hey, are these questions relevant? Are we missing anything big? Is this wording confusing? It's a super important peer review step to make sure your blueprint is rock solid.
All right, blueprint's done, raw materials are gathered. Now it's time for the actual construction. This is phase 2, where we start putting together the prototype of our scale and running the very first round of tests.
So this part has 4 big steps. First, we pre-test the questions to make sure people understand them. Then, we give the survey to a whole bunch of people. After that, we use stats to chop down the number of questions. And finally, we try to uncover the scale's hidden structure.
Now, pre-testing isn't just about checking for typos. It's way cooler than that. It involves something called cognitive interviews. Researchers will sit down with a small group of people and ask them to think out loud as they answer each question. This is amazing because it shows you right away if a question is confusing or if people are interpreting it in a way you never intended. It's absolutely critical for getting the wording just right. Okay, so after the survey goes out to a few hundred people, we hit a really crucial step: item reduction. Remember that massive pool of questions we started with? Now it's time to trim the fat. And this isn't based on gut feelings. It's done with some pretty powerful statistical analysis to scientifically identify and get rid of the weakest questions. So how do they decide which questions make the cut? Well, they run a bunch of tests. For example, something called the Item Discrimination Index checks if a question can actually tell the difference between people who are high in burnout and those who are low. I mean, think about it. If you had a burnout question like, do you like puppies? Well, pretty much everyone would say yes, right? That question tells you nothing useful. This rigorous analysis makes sure only the hardest working questions get to stay.
And finally, once you've got this lean, mean set of questions, you run one more big analysis called factor extraction. This is a really cool statistical technique that shows you how the questions cluster together. It helps scientists see the hidden dimensions of what they're measuring. For instance, they might discover that their burnout scale isn't just one thing. It's actually made up of 3 distinct parts. Say, emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and a feeling of ineffectiveness. All right, so we've designed it, we've built it, it looks great on paper, but is it road ready? Is it going to hold up in the real world? That's where the final and maybe the most important phase comes in, the stress test. This is all about calibrating our new tool to make sure it's not just good, but scientifically sound.
And this stress test, it really comes down to three things. We need to double-check the scale structure, we need to test its reliability to make sure it's consistent, and we absolutely have to test its validity to make sure it's accurate. Let's break those down real quick.
So first up is reliability, and the easiest way to think about this is with a bathroom scale. If you step on it, see your weight, step off, and then step right back on, you expect to see the exact same number, right? That's consistency. A scientific scale has to work the same way. If nothing has actually changed, the result shouldn't change either.
And this isn't just a gut feeling, right? This is science. They actually quantify this consistency using a statistic called Cronbach's alpha. For any scale to be taken seriously in research, it's got to hit a score of 0.70 or higher. Anything less than that, and it's just considered too wobbly, too noisy to be of any real use.
But here's the catch. A scale can be super reliable, giving you the same result every time and still be completely wrong. And that's where validity comes in. Validity asks the single most important question. Are we actually measuring what we think we're measuring? It's like your bathroom scale consistently telling you you're 7 feet tall. It's reliable for sure, but it's not valid.
So how do they test for this? They attack it from two sides. With convergent validity, they check if their new burnout scale gives similar scores to other, older, trusted burnout scales. It should. But just as important is discriminant validity. Here, they check that their burnout scale has nothing to do with something totally unrelated, like, I don't know, your favorite ice cream flavor. This proves the scale is hitting the right target and only the right target. So after hearing about this intense 9-step journey, you might be thinking, man, why go through all that trouble? Why does this level of crazy rigor matter so much?
This quote from the paper we're looking at just nails it. These scales are literally the foundation for tons of research in psychology, medicine, and sociology. And if that foundation is shaky, if your measuring tape is off, then every single thing you build on top of it is going to be unstable and untrustworthy.
And look, the payoff for all this hard work is massive. It means we get research findings we can actually trust. It lets public health officials track huge trends, like nationwide stress levels after a major event. It helps doctors and policymakers create treatments and programs that actually work because they're based on good data. What this whole thing really does is it lets us take these messy, abstract parts of being human and bring them into the light where we can study them scientifically.
So yeah, it is a long, demanding process to get from a simple idea to a validated scientific tool. But it's that very process that makes so much of modern science possible. So it really makes you think, right? Now that you know the recipe for measuring the unmeasurable, what invisible concept out there in the world do you think we most need a scale for?